Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I know that we're enjoying our lunch, and I want to say thank you again for sticking with us. I know this morning was a good introduction, an opportunity for that. We're really in for a treat now as we can have some discussion and on this panel with the legislative leaders that we do have. To kick things off, and the panel that we have is investment in future entrepreneurial economic development. We'll have some questions and then have an opportunity for you to have some suggestions or any questions that you would like me to ask as well. For those who weren't here this morning, I'm Howie Morales, I'm the Lieutenant Governor, and I've been fortunate to serve with each of these members of the legislature during my time when I served in the legislature and their committed leadership. So we do have with us, and what I'm going to have them do to begin is I'll have them just give a brief introduction, just a description of what they see coming in this session. But it's going to be very brief because we only have, I believe, 45 minutes. But I'd like for you to hear from each of them. So first, we'll start off with Speaker of the House, Mr. Javier Martínez.
Can you guys hear me? Hello. All right. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. Thank you for having us and hosting us here today. I'm Javier Martínez, and I serve as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I'm also the state legislator for this area, for downtown North Valley. I was first elected in 2014, so I'm entering now my 10th year of service and very excited to be here. Did you also want me to talk about priorities, or is that later?
We can, we'll get into some of those priorities in a bit.
Great. Thank you all. Enjoy lunch.
Next, we have Representative Ryan Lane, who drove in from Farmington this morning to be with us. Thank you for joining us, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Am I on? Yeah, there we are. Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity here. I actually really appreciate what the Rainforest Center does. I love that UNM has a nonprofit that's focused specifically on entrepreneurship. I think that's super important. I don't think we talk about that enough, especially with our youth. So I was born and raised in Aztec, just a little east of Farmington, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. There's a little bit of rivalry there between Farmington and Aztec, but I have a law practice there, and I do quite a bit of consulting with small business owners. And then I also own a craft ice cream shop, and we employ about 15 employees. I was elected in 2021, and in addition to representing House District 3, I'm also the House Republican leader. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. And individual I had a chance to serve as I came into the legislature. He had come into the legislature, so we spent a lot of years with the Finance Committee, knowing that when we hit the recession and the zero reserves that I talked about this morning, Senator Muñoz is now chair of the Senate Finance Committee and Legislative Finance Committee. Thank you, Senator Muñoz, for joining us from Gallup.
Thank you. And I'm George Muñoz. I'm from Gallup. I'm a contractor developer. I grew up in Gallup, and I've been in the legislature 16 years, or pretty close to 16 years. I think Senator Morales, or Lieutenant Governor Morales, has 1 year on me. And so I grew up in Gallup, and I'm in the legislature. I chair the Senate Finance and the LFC. And being a business guy in the legislature is a little bit different perspective than what we see boots on the ground. And it was interesting to hear some conversations earlier. I might have been the only other guy in the room, I'm saying, that might have known what corn mush stew is. There's one lady I know, but it's interesting to hear the perspectives on the reservations when you grow up around the reservation and on the reservation in that. So thank you. I think it's going to be an important conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And again, to start things off, I'll start with Speaker Martínez to have an opportunity on what we're going to have coming into this legislative session, specifically to how you think that New Mexico stacks up nationally in building an entrepreneurial ecosystem.
That's a great question, Lieutenant Governor. And I think it's got a multifaceted response, right? First off, all four of us up here throughout our careers in the legislature and even beyond that have worked really hard to help diversify New Mexico's economy. And I know you hear that a lot, and you hear that a lot during campaign season. Like there's always the one guy who's going to diversify the economy. And I've realized that it's really a body of work that predates us and that will continue long after we're gone. Some of the work I've been involved in, first and foremost, early childhood education, I think is a big component to that, both in terms of the jobs it creates, the career path it creates for people, particularly women of color and working class people, but also the ability of folks to pursue careers and have a safe, nurturing space for their child to be in while they are at work or pursuing educational opportunities. that's been a labor of love, and it's something that I'm really proud of. And I think it will yield some very positive results when it comes to diversifying the economy of New Mexico. Other more concrete examples include our efforts to legalize recreational cannabis. I know there are some issues with enforcement right now, but it is an industry that is upwards of $300 to $400 million a year in revenue. And it's not just the guy selling pot at the corner store, it's everything that goes with it. It's manufacturing, it's marketing, it's accounting, it's IT, it's security. There's a whole host of services that go into building that part of the economy. In addition, over the last couple of years, we've created and leaned into our state's strengths by creating new opportunities for entrepreneurs through the outdoor recreation and creative economies. Those are places where entrepreneurs can really jump in. I'm particularly excited about those smaller rural communities that may not have access to a type of rainforest building, for them to be able to jump into entrepreneurship successfully. Additionally, we've helped New Mexico businesses in the early stages of development grow through New Mexico's venture capital program, which, as you know, invest venture private equity funds into new and expanding businesses. And then lastly, the Opportunity Enterprise Fund. That's something that was created, I believe, 2 years ago. I've had a great number of meetings with many of you in this room over coffee up the street at Humble or down here at Sueños. And you've told me yourselves how impactful that new fund has been. The ability to deliver funds to projects, to concepts that otherwise would not be able to get funded and off the ground. There's one here in downtown off of 7th and Central, where they've taken an old, abandoned mechanic shop, and they're going to turn it into a community hub. There's a brewery that's going to set up shop. There's a restaurant and other retail opportunities right in the heart of downtown. These are the types of things that your legislature can do in bipartisan, sometimes even nonpartisan fashion, because they are the right thing to do.
Thank you, Speaker Martinez. Same question, Leader Ryan. I'll go ahead and just repeat that. Nationally, how does New Mexico stand in the entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. So I don't mean to be negative Nelly, but I think also we need to be really frank and real about how New Mexico is viewed nationally when it comes to entrepreneurship. And unfortunately, it's not well. And I talk to my colleagues from other states, particularly in the business field. Our reputation has not been a great one. And I know that we're working hard, and this is a big part of changing that reputation. But unfortunately, that's sort of the reality where we're at. Whether that's sort of overregulation. I mentioned I have an ice cream shop, for example. And so just to give you a real simple example, we have to have a license to sell ice cream to the public through the Environment Department. That's completely reasonable, and to make sure that we're offering safe products to the public. But to provide that exact same product that's created in the exact same manner in the exact same location to a grocery store or a restaurant, we have to apply and get a separate license. Now, I can understand making sure the restaurant is safe or the grocery store handles it properly. I got no problem with that. But the idea that we have to have a separate licensure to do something like that, and that's just a simple example, but it's those type of over-regulations that's particularly difficult on smaller businesses. The other thing I'll mention that I think is a challenge for New Mexico is we have to compete with the labs for a really well-trained workforce. If you look at sort of the money that is spent on R&D in private companies in New Mexico, 40% of that actually comes from the feds. If you look at most other states, it's less than 1%. And so we've sort of built this ecosystem where we're constantly competing with the federal government for a highly skilled, trained workforce. And I think that's something that we also need to look at as well, as far as how do we sort of develop that workforce as well.
Thank you, Leader Ryan. Excellent points that are made right there. Chairman Muñoz, would you like to build on that?
I think competitively, if we look at the labs in New Mexico and you look at the generation that's coming up, right? I have a 21-year-old and a 24-year-old, right? They are, and they're in business for themselves. They are completely different entrepreneurs in the way they think and the way they move forward. And New Mexico, I think we're poised with the benefits and the opportunity that we give people. It's how do we create this new group of young entrepreneurs that create something? And you look through history and you look at Microsoft and how many people have developed stuff here and then left. It's building behind that. I think the resources are here, but you got to look at, I don't know, for me, I look at kids today, right? We went to Vegas for July or New Year's. Where am I going to a Post Malone concert? Where am I with? A bunch of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, and there's some aging people. I wasn't the oldest one in the room, but you have to know how that new generation thinks and how you're going to adapt in that entrepreneurship and economic development, right? Because they don't think like us. They want to go to work at 10 o'clock in the afternoon and quit at 6 and then maybe get up at 2 in the morning, but they want to go to the bar from 6 to 8, have a good time, and figure out when they're going to do their work and work remotely at a higher dollar value. They want a more quality of life in New Mexico, but naturally we stand up with the opportunities that we're giving them. We're just not thinking like them. And that's the problem that I think that I see between me and my kids, because we don't think alike at all. And that may just be age, but the way they think about how they develop business and what they want to go do is completely different, because they want to go to Vegas and see Post Malone on the weekend and come back and go to work at 5 in the morning and quit at 5 at night, but they're going to have a good time doing it somewhere else. And that's the problem is we have the labs. If we could figure that partnership to develop those entrepreneurs with the labs, then our growth we'd boom. But I don't know how you develop that new economic development.
Thank you, Chairman Muñoz. And speaking with that, Representative Lane, in building an ecosystem, an entrepreneurial ecosystem here in New Mexico, what are some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses that you identify here?
So even though as a negative Nelly, the first response, I'll try to be positive in this one because I really am trying to be an optimistic person and a practical person. I think the JTIP program that we have in New Mexico is great for training sort of your initial workforce. I think that's been a wide success. The Office of Entrepreneurship that's been created. So that was a bill that I actually ran in this last legislative session, flew through the House and the Senate. Our Madam Governor decided to veto that bill, which is okay, because then she turned around and created the Office of Entrepreneurship within the ED. And so I don't need the credit. I'm just glad that we have the department that exists. It's an important department, particularly for our population that maybe hasn't had a lot of formal training in business or a lot of experience in entrepreneurship. And so what this office does is if you want to start a business, you have an idea, essentially you would go to this agency and they're not going to form the business for you. They're not going to write your contracts. They're not going to do any of that, but they're going to tell you, okay, this is what you need in order to get through the environment department. This is what you need at the Secretary of State's office. They walk you through each of those offices and help you navigate that process. Because what I've found in my private law practice is I'll have somebody that'll come to me and they have an idea for a business, but they don't have any idea to how to get it off the ground and what they need to do to comply and all of these things. And the reality is not everybody has the means to come and consult a lawyer. And so I think this is a great thing for our state to sort of have that entrepreneurial bent available to all segments of our society.
Speaker Martínez?
So I'll piggyback off of what my two colleagues here to my left have stated. I think that we have been blessed with record revenues, thanks in very large part to the oil and gas industry. And I believe that we've done a good job the last few years under the leadership of Chairman Muñoz and Chairman Small on our side in investing those dollars and ensuring that today's money is tomorrow's money as well. So by investing in human capital, like I mentioned, early childhood education is a big piece of it. The Opportunity Scholarship is another big piece of it. At the same time, we also have to be looking at the reforms that my colleague Representative Lane mentioned, right? Regulation. As a Democrat, I like a certain degree of regulation, but there's also stuff that it's just hard. You know, the ice cream shop example. I mean, that's a little ridiculous, right? That you would have to apply for a different license, for example. Locally, land use and zoning laws, I think, really are an obstacle to us creating hubs for creativity and entrepreneurship within the economy. Albuquerque, I think, is working hard toward fixing some of those obstacles, particularly when it comes to housing, for example. But it's still something that is very hard to put your finger on. There's an article in the New York Times came out a month or two ago about how Houston, quote unquote, solved their homelessness problem. And amongst all the things that Houston was able to do was build housing immediately, because it's Texas, and Texas doesn't quite believe in zoning and land use, the way we do at least. That's an example of a place where we can be creative and solve a problem and not let the bureaucratic process dictate what can be done and not be done. Lastly, I think another one of our weaknesses has been our inability to build an environment that our young people can be proud of and excited about. I was a big proponent of the New Mexico United Stadium being built down the road. I think it would have been a game changer for downtown, the way this building has been a game changer for this part of downtown. Unfortunately, land use, regulation, the politics of despair and the politics of naysaying won the day. Now, I'm still glad the stadium is going to be built, unfortunately not here, but it will also become a hub for activity up in the north part of the city. So there is hope, right? There is quite a bit that we can do and continue to do, but we have to stay the course in order to address those weaknesses as we see them within this environment.
Thank you, Speaker Martinez. And Chairman Muñoz, and those strengths and weaknesses in building our ecosystem, would you care to add anything?
To build on strengths in students, and I believe in opportunity scholarship. People say, I don't think kids should get free tuition in any way, shape, or form. But anytime a kid goes to college and takes an English class and maybe drops out, takes a welding class and gets a certificate, they have that ability to move up. Educating those children and moving them up and just giving them a chance to worry about school and not worry about the daily fight of working in the restaurant and then coming back and trying to pay for tuition, helping them in an affordable way is a way that we can grow that economy and grow those people and develop them. I'll give you an example. One of my young son's friends went to a dual credit charter school, right? Graduated, my kid went down the same path. Kid went to NMSU, is getting an aerospace engineering degree, went to work for Devon Energy in Oklahoma, and is now going to work for the labs at $300,000 a year. Those are the things that you want to develop, right? In education and how you move those. Now, he's going to go to work at the lab, so that's an entrepreneurial spirit. But you talk to my kid who'd almost had the same path but didn't have that brains to become an aerospace engineer. They have it in them. It's just how do we get the ability? And regulation, every time I get a mail from the taxation and revenue or anybody, it's like, oh my God, what do I got to jump through to get this done today? And I'll give you the perfect example is they sent me something and they asked for my driver's license and my copy of my driver's license, so my physical address. Well, I live in rural New Mexico. We don't get mail, but I had to pay a $17 charge to change it to go to my P.O. box. And they're the ones that requested it. But I mean, government regulation in those are hard to navigate, especially as an entrepreneur, right? How do I go develop this technology in this space right here? And is it allowable? And how can we do that? And how can we move them forward and move them quickly? Because they're not going to wait on government. These young kids are not waiting on government. And if people that develop and want to do that wait on government, that's where we lose. Because they're going to go to some place where the force is not as strong and it's easier for them to move forward.
Thank you, Chairman. And Speaker, I'll direct the next question to you to start us off. In trying to recruit and trying to have entrepreneurs to choose a state in New Mexico, what are some things that we can do?
Education, education, education. And I know we hear this a lot, and it's the largest part of our budget year to year is public education. Including higher education. We need to double down. I had a meeting with incredible, very well-respected business person a couple weeks ago here in town, and they asked, why aren't things changing? We invest so much, but things aren't changing. I asked this person for patience. We have a generations-long problem that we are trying to solve. And it's not just going to take money, it's going to take a different approach to how we deliver education. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I'm a product of Highland High School, class of 1999. As soon as I entered high school, it was like college, 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 college. Not because my grades were incredible or because my parents went to college themselves, they actually didn't. But that was the metric of success. You graduate high school and you have to go to college. Well, not every kid needs to go to college, right? A lot of kids can go and get a technical degree or a certificate, right? They can go through an apprenticeship program. There are examples of education of public schools here in the city that are doing just that. And kids are graduating high school with an associate's degree, ready to go into an apprenticeship program to become a plumber. Albuquerque and New Mexico needs more plumbers and more electricians. They don't need more lawyers, right? As a lawyer, I can tell you they don't need more lawyers. With all due respect to the lawyers in the room, myself included, we need more plumbers and electricians, and we need more construction workers, and we need those types of entrepreneurs as well, right? I think we make the mistake of thinking that entrepreneurs are going to be in the biosciences, engineering, somebody creating an app or somebody coming up with the next amazing microchip. Yes, all that is true, but also we need entrepreneurs that are going to be doing the blue collar work that AI is not going to take over anytime soon. So doubling down on those investments, being smart about those investments, and ensuring that all of our kids have a pathway to a career. And that career should take into account every single opportunity and possibility that that child wants to make happen. And that's on us to deliver, right? Because oftentimes the policymakers, what we'll do is we'll look at the metrics and say, well, public ed, you're not really delivering on the promise. So, maybe it's time we shift money away over here or put it over there. I don't think that's the answer, right? What we need to do is challenge the system to think more creatively and bring folks like you, like the ones in this room, into that process so that you can help those institutions think more creatively.
Thank you. And Leader Lane, how do we encourage more entrepreneurs to come to the state?
Mr. Speaker, I'd love to live in a world where we didn't need lawyers, so you don't offend me at all. And I hope actually you'll tell the Trial Lawyers Association when they come to lobby you that we need less lawyers in this state. So look forward to that conversation. Honestly, I think, I'll probably be alone on this panel with this comment, but I think we need sweeping tax reform. You look at entrepreneurs that decide where they're going to settle and where they're going to form a business. That's one of the first things they look at. For example, we currently tax services, and I'm licensed to practice in Colorado, and I have clients that come down and I do work for them, and I give them their invoice, and they look at it and they're like, why am I paying 8% for attorney's fees? I'm like, well, welcome to New Mexico. They don't do that in Colorado. Those things make a difference. That's 8% right off the top. I think we need to have a serious discussion also about our level of personal income tax, of PIT. Most entrepreneurs, they're either going to be a sole proprietorship or they're going to form an S corporation, and that income is going to flow through to the individual level, and that does make a difference. And you look at the states that have rolled back their PIT, they are flourishing, and I think that's something we need to look at as well, particularly when we're in a situation where we have $3.5 billion in extra revenue thanks to oil and gas. Now's the time to make those sort of generational changes, and I think our tax structure is a great place for that. The last thing I'll mention is, unfortunately, as a legislative body, we have a habit of passing laws that make it difficult to do business here. One that I think could be front and center this coming session, depending on what the Gov puts on her call, is the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. That's something I think everybody should be aware of if you own a business. And we can have a discussion about whether that's needed or not in New Mexico. But the reality is, even if you agree that that's a good law, the compliance aspect of that, what it means is that it's another layer of compliance for small businesses that have to outsource their lawyers, that have to outsource their accountants. And so what that does is when we pass those kinds of bills that have teeth in them, that if you don't comply with them, there are serious consequences that a trial lawyer can sue you and recover money from you. what that means then is we as a state are now favoring these multi-million-dollar corporations that have all that in-house, that have all that expertise, or yet making it again for small business to conduct business here or to form businesses. So I think also as a legislative body, we need to be mindful of entrepreneurship as we're passing these laws.
Thank you. Chairman Muñoz, same question of how we can encourage and recruit entrepreneurs to come to New Mexico, but also you have unique experience because you've also made sure that we've had entrepreneurs stay in the state of New Mexico. Can you give us your perspective?
You know, we did LEDA, and I don't know how many years back, but LEDA reform needs to happen because we thought, and I think my comment was at the time, when we did LEDA, we wanted $50 million in a fund. So if somebody comes in big and we say, okay, we need 50 million to sink these guys in New Mexico, we'll have it available. And LEDA completely turned around through political reason, and it's like a sprinkler, and the grass turns green, but nothing grows. And you look back and you look at the promises in LEDA that were made, and not just this exec, but other exec. You know, 130,000 to a meat factory and a butcher shop in Santa Fe. That doesn't create jobs. The guy at Mesa del Sol created $4,000 jobs that are coming in a solar company, and we give him 17 million. To sink that solar company, we should have gave him 50 and came back and gave him another 100 and said, create another 8,000 jobs. I think the other thing in New Mexico that really needs to happen is to create those entrepreneurs is to hire a headhunter. You watch and you go out to other markets and you take those employees and those entrepreneurs from other markets and you bring them to our market and you develop them. And you give them the tools that they need to develop and grow in New Mexico. But, you know, in economic development, I think, you know, people like film, people in Albuquerque like film. Well, film's all right, but, you know, the problem is let's make sure that those are New Mexicans going to work. And they're really not New Mexicans going to work. So we've traded film school here. We got one in Las Cruces. I was told the greatest film school between Austin and LA is NMSU. And so how do we develop that and for economic development? How do we make them the directors and the producers in the film? And how do we grow that entrepreneurial spirit? But I think that keying off is, okay, who do we want to get to come into New Mexico and how we can get them? And what's the easiest way to develop them? Do we take a partial estate land and say, you know what, there's no zoning on this. And you can come in and you can throw up whatever you want to throw up, a solar plant, whatever you need to, and give them the resources and the availability to do that. But it takes money, and we have money right now, but you know, you got to play in that game and you got to play in that arena every day to understand what really economic development is.
Thank you, Chairman. We're going to go on to our last question. Then we're going to give an opportunity for the legislators to also share upcoming session, as well as get questions from the audience. But with that, Speaker Martínez, what is your shared vision of what the future could be when we talk about entrepreneurial economic development right here in the state of New Mexico?
I think that we have an opportunity, a once-in-a-generation opportunity, not only this session, but over the next few legislative sessions and over the next few years, to build an economic environment that works for all of us. But it's going to take all of us. And look, case in point, first of all, I agree with Leader Lane about tax reform. I mean, we have an outdated gross receipts tax structure that pyramids taxes and that is horribly high, right? But there's a reason for that. We have not updated our property tax codes in decades, right? So when you hear that Texas doesn't have an income tax, they have a really high property tax rate to offset that. New Mexico has artificially low property tax rates. We've actually tried. We've had a couple of bills that would have fixed it, but it's political suicide, if you can imagine, right? And not even from Republicans, but it's actually coming from Democrats in rural communities saying, no way, do not tax my ancestral land up north, right? The tax code has to be fixed. Now, to our credit, I think we've made some inroads. We've made it a lot more beneficial to working people, thanks in large part to the leadership of Chairman Muñoz, who has been an outspoken critic of how the tax code has been tilted toward the well-to-do on the backs of working people. Needless to say, I challenge all of us, right? We're in this beautiful space. We're in this building that breeds entrepreneurship, that breeds that creativity in economic development. But all we've got to do is walk outside these doors, and you're going to see people who are down and completely out. And if you drive 6 miles east on Central into the International District, where I grew up and where my family still lives, there are people who are constantly lighting fires to keep themselves warm in the middle of the street. So, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, members of the audience, we can't possibly build the entrepreneurship environment that we want if we don't also bring those folks along with us, right? We can't close ourselves off in these walls and pretend like that issue is not out there. It is. And it is generations of divestment. It is generations of, just kind of ignored and it goes away. Well, it doesn't. And it's here to stay. And those folks out on the street are also raising children, right? And now we are going to be working with children later on in life who are probably dealing with the same struggles that the parents dealt with, because the fact of the matter is the folks that are out there on the streets are dealing with the issues that their parents dealt with. It's called generational trauma. I don't have the answer. I don't know if any one of us has the answer. But what I do know is that the New Mexico I want for my children, ages 8 and 11, is a New Mexico where they can thrive, a New Mexico they can be proud of, a New Mexico that they can walk and drive through and be excited about, laying roots of their own. And so I'm going to challenge you all in this room, right? As you're creating the next great app, as you're creating the next great business venture, help us think through some of these social problems as well. Because that same creativity you carry with you can go a long way out in the streets of Albuquerque and the streets of New Mexico.
Thank you, Speaker Martínez. What does the future look like, Leader Lane? What does the future look like here for economic development?
I think one of the habits we have had as a state is when we have a problem, we think that the reason why we have the problem is there just hasn't been enough money thrown at that problem. So we, time and time again, will throw money at a certain program, and if only had more money. I think when it comes to this persistent issue of New Mexico lagging behind in economic development, particularly with entrepreneurship, I think we need to look at something fundamentally different. And what I would propose, and this is something I'm very passionate about, and this is a long-term project of mine, I think we need to reevaluate the structure of how we have our economic development structured within state government. There are about 11 other states that have implemented this, and really their economies have taken off. And so what they did is they took their economic development department, which is a state-run agency with a secretary who's appointed by the governor, and they tweaked it. So what they did is by statute, they create this board of directors, and the board of directors hire and fire essentially what would be a secretary level position, a director. But what makes it, and then let me add, below the director and below are all state employees. So they're getting paid a W-2 wage from the state. So you have the resources of state government. But here's how it's different. And here's where I think it's made a big impact, is that board of directors, the ones who hire and fire the director and give that department direction about how we're going to do economic development and the policies we're going to implement and their strategies. It's comprised of a vast group of people. So you have governor appointments, so it could be cabinet secretaries, it could be the governor herself who chairs it. You have local mayors who serve on that board, and you have about half of those are highly successful people in private enterprise. And so what you have is you have this board with vast experience from all across the state that are now guiding the policy for this economic organization. And the states that have done this, really, not just in terms of attracting outside entities, but in terms of developing a workforce, in terms of creating entrepreneurship, because these are the folks in the local communities, the private enterprise, and then the state level who see what the roadblocks are. And you don't have to go through that encumbering process of state government to get those roadblocks out of the way. They are very efficient and very responsive. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. I think it's a practical way to actually move the needle in New Mexico and make us successful with our neighboring states.
Thank you for that. Chairman Muñoz.
You know, I'm going to agree with the speaker and Ryan Lane, right? You know, education, and my dad told me this, the most important thing I can give you in your entire life that nobody can ever take away is an education. And we've set that up through early childhood, and we're starting to move in that direction. The first cohort's going to be hitting college, I think, in early child this year, right? And we're going to see what happens as we move forward. But, you know, New Mexico only needs 1,800 more graduates not to be 50th in the United States. That'll put us in the middle of the population. That's a small number to get to. But how do we really change it? Well, we got to make change. And that's the thing I think people are afraid of sometimes in the legislature, is to take that risk. There's a young man up here, a Navajo gentleman, and he said, you know, entrepreneurs are problem solvers and thinkers. Well, I'm a risk taker in my entrepreneurial deal, right? I roll the dice every single day when I open the door, what I can do and how much money I can make and what's going to happen. And I think we have to be a little more risk takers. And change has to come. Early childhood was a hard change and a long change because there were people that were afraid of change, afraid of what it would do into a population. And we look at economic development and let's make the change. I agree with Representative Lane. Will it be perfect? Probably not, but is it a change that will make a change and make a difference for job growth in New Mexico? But if we don't roll the dice, if we don't play the bat, if we don't trust in someone to do this and make the change ourselves as legislators to give you guys the opportunity to make that change, then we're going to stay in the same place we are today. But I caution everybody, because I sit here and they talk about, oh, the government should do this and the government should do that. The less we do in the business world in government, the safer everybody is. And people don't believe that, but I tell my constituents, you know, you don't want me in Santa Fe, because they're like, you know, oh, you're going to Santa Fe, George, you're going to Santa Fe, you're always in Santa Fe. Yeah, well, you know, in Santa Fe, I can make you wear purple underwear on Sundays if we want to pass a law to do that. You are safe when we are not in session. and that is the number one rule, but don't look for a government to solve this. I mean, there's a kid from New York, I think he's sitting right here, that came from New York. I stirred up and he asked a question. I think that's him right here. And I listened to what they were talking about and what was happening in Shiprock. And although I speak Navajo pretty good, so I could understand some of what they're telling you. But we have to listen to these young kids. There's another kid named Alex in the back. I kind of watched him during the deal. But if we don't watch them and young kids and how they develop, because they're the next developers, they're the next resources as we move forward. They're the ones in the building taking the risk. And so why not make a change?
Thank you for that, Chairman. As we go into the last part, I believe we have about 5 more minutes. I'd like to give each legislator an opportunity to share the upcoming session of how they can have some of the plans, whether they're bills or whether some of the thoughts they've worked over the interim, that can lead to the entrepreneurial spirit that you've been talking about today. Speaker Martínez.
Gotta wait for the green light. It's a 30-day session. Budget, 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 budget. Everything else is going to come our way. You know, the governor's prerogative to put things on her call. Other bills that will be germane because of budget impact. But regardless of all of that, the budget is our top priority. I'm very proud of the budget that Chairman Muñoz and Vice Chair Small and the entire Legislative Finance Committee have pulled together. This has been, and you as business people know that transparency is key, right? You don't want us to hide the ball from you. You're investing your own hard-earned dollars into projects, into developments. The last thing you want is for government to be shady and not act with transparency. I'm proud that this LFC process under Chairman Muñoz and Vice Chair Small has been incredibly transparent. They've traveled the state. It's been bipartisan in nature, in some cases nonpartisan, because at the end of the day, dollars and cents are not Republicans or Democrats, and they've done a tremendous job. That budget framework will be the launch point for the House budgeting process, which will begin later this week and into next week. And then eventually the Senate will get to do its work and put any final touches on the budget. But that's the top priority, as it should be. Having said all that, you know, what you can do and how you can be involved, we plan, I believe both chambers plan to continue to do committee hearings on Zoom. So if you want to be involved in that process, provide comments, provide expert testimony, You are welcome to join us by Zoom if you can make it up into the building. If you do make it into the building, please feel free to stop by our office. We have an open door policy in my office. Come by anytime. Our team will be happy to greet you and meet you, and time permitting, so will I. So thank you all.
Thank you, Speaker Martínez. Leader Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. So I'll just stick to one thing. We talked for probably half an hour alone on this topic, but and it's corollary to what the speaker mentioned earlier. But I know that my caucus is heavily focused and hoping to lead the charge on funding for career and tech education. Oftentimes I think of entrepreneurship as more like the professional space or technology space, and certainly need all that. But I think we also need to take stock of the state that we live in, that we have these rural areas where there aren't a lot of these businesses, and that you have to travel to bigger cities to find an electrician or a plumber or things of that nature. And so that'll be a big push for us, is trying to make sure that that funding makes it out into our rural districts, and to, frankly, have this idea of entrepreneurship from an early age. So, thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Muñoz.
I think you've seen New Mexico see this boom of oil and gas money, and we were underfunded in some areas, and we've moved up quite a bit. We've grown that budget, and people say, oh, you tremendously grown it, but there's a lot of needs in a small poverty state. And so as me as a legislator, you look forward, if you're going to have the money, you're going to spend it. You're going to spend it, and are you spending it correctly? That's the key answer, right? And you look at government agencies, do I give you enough money? Are you spending your money? Are you spending it correctly? Are you moving the needle at the end of the day? And that's what really matters to me in the budget, right? Am I moving the needle for those people in New Mexico that really need it? Are we making the change, the slow, steady change that I think is a long-term change in New Mexico to grow the population? I mean, the only way we're going to grow out and change New Mexico is we got to have a population growth, not a decline. People have to move here for a reason and have to want to be here for a reason, whether it's to climb mountains and outdoor rec, whether it's to fish in the San Juan, whether it's to go to Las Cruces. They have to want to come. And so how do we move the needle as we move New Mexico forward? I mean, this budgeting process it's turmoil, really, when you think that what I have to do. My wife about divorced me about 277,000 times because she said, you spend more time working on that budget than you do on our own business. You'd be a billionaire if you just quit this and not do that. But it's not where my heart is, right? It's how you move New Mexico and what we got to do to move it. And I don't care if I get paid, but someone has to do it. And you want that right person there, and you want that balance. I don't want to fight with Representative Lane. I don't want to fight with the speaker. That's not my objective and my goal. Our goal is to work together, and I think everybody agrees to this, is how we move the needle with the dollars that we have. We're not all going to agree on anything. I may be the only Democrat that voted against paid family medical leave because I'm in business and it doesn't work for me. But it's different for everybody in their position. But I would say one thing. If New Mexico would focus on how we move the needle in New Mexico, Democrat, Republican, whatever you are, it doesn't matter to me. Just move the needle. Make it better for that generation of early childhood. Make it better for my generation of kids. Make it better for the speaker's kids that are in junior high and in that age group. Make it better. Make it easier and make it better. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, these legislators are getting ready to go into session next week for 30 days, away from their families, away from their home, away from their job. And today they made some time to come here to be with us. So we thank them. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you.